Plants is one of the 4 kingdoms of the eukarya domain, from massive sequoia trees, one of the largest living organisms on Earth, to tiny duckweed that float on water. From seagrass that grow in the deep oceans to the citrus trees we farm with. Plants are all around us, and we depend on them for food, oxygen, and many other necessities of life. What all plants have in common are certain structures that enable them to perform certain functions, such as photosynthesis and respiration. If we have a good understanding of these structures, also called plant anatomy, and the functions of the plants, known as their physiology, we will be able to understand what plants need in order to grow best, which is critical if we are involved in plant production. Before we get started, please note the following. In this module, we use many difficult scientific terms, which you might not understand when you first hear them. I will give you definitions for these terms, and I will also put them into a glossary for you. Look out for me, and please pay special attention whenever a term is placed in the glossary. You can always refer back to it if you find a term that you are uncertain of. Plant species have diverse structural compositions. Some plants have flowers, some don't. Some plants have massive root systems, some have tiny roots, and there are even some with no roots at all. Some plants store food in its roots, and others store water in its leaves. Some have thick woody stems, and some have long soft boughs. In order to understand the particular plant that we work with, we need to first understand each plant part, what it looks like, and how it functions. Particularly, we will look at the following plant parts: seeds, roots, stems, leaves, flowers, and fruit. The seed is the starting point of a plant. A seed has tiny parts that develop into the parts of the plant. Once the plant has grown, it will eventually produce fruit containing more seeds. Seeds can be tiny, such as those of vegetable or garden flower plants, or they can be large, such as the red seeds of a cycad plant or the seed of an avocado. They can be sticky, so that they will stick to the coats or feet of animals, or they can be light and winged, so that the wind can carry and disperse them. No matter what it looks like, seeds are almost always made up of 2 parts, namely a seed coat and an embryo. The embryo is a plant in its earliest stage of development before it becomes self-supporting. Once the embryo begins to grow out from the seed or germinate, it forms a seedling. The seed coat is the protective outer layer of a seed, and it protects the embryo from injury and from insects and diseases. There is a small opening in the seed coat, called the micropyle, through which the pollen tube passes before fertilization, and through which the radicle emerges during germination. The micropyle is a small opening in the seed coat, which was originally a small opening in the ovule through which the pollen passed during fertilization. The embryo consists of 3 parts, namely the radicle, the plumule, and the cotyledons. The radicle is the part of the plant embryo that forms the taproot of the young plant after germination. The plumule is the rudimentary primary shoot of a plant embryo, also known as a terminal bud or growth point. The cotyledons are the seed leaves. Plants are classified based on the number of cotyledons in the seed. Plants, such as grasses, are monocotyledons or monocots, meaning the seed contains 1 cotyledon. Citrus seeds are dicotyledons or dicots, and have 2 cotyledons. Dicotyledon or dicot refers to a flowering plant that has a pair of cotyledons in the embryo of the seed. Monocotyledons or monocot refers to a flowering plant that has only 1 cotyledon in the embryo of the seed. Some seeds also have visible endosperm, Endosperm is the nutritive tissue of a seed and may contain carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. The endosperm is a temporary food source for the seed. In some plants, the endosperm is absorbed by the cotyledons, leaving the mature seed without separate endosperm. Seed germination happens when growth is triggered in a seed after a period of dormancy and is marked by the radicle emerging through the seed coat. Once a seed has been formed, it can remain dormant or resting for a long period of time. The seed will only germinate when the conditions in which it finds itself are favorable. The seed needs enough water and oxygen, suitable temperature, and suitable light. As the first step in germination, the seed starts taking up water through the seed coat, which was dry while the seed was dormant. This is also referred to as imbibition. Imbibition means the absorption of something, such as liquid or heat. In terms of seed germination, it means the absorption of water by the seed coat. Imbibition causes the seed coat to soften and the micropyle to open, after which the seed can take water up faster. Metabolism now starts in the seed. Metabolism means the ongoing series of chemical interactions that take place in every living organism that provides the energy and nutrients to sustain life. The first metabolic processes that take place convert the food reserves in the endosperm into simpler substances that are transported to the embryo. Now that the embryo has water and food, it starts growing. The radicle starts to grow first. It appears through the micropyle and forms the taproot of the plant, which grows downwards in response to gravity. Next, the epicotyl and, in some plants, the hypocotyl start growing upwards against gravity, pushing the plumule and the cotyledons above the surface of the growth medium. The hypocotyl is the part of the plant axis or stem between the roots and where the cotyledons are attached. The epicotyl is the part of the plant axis or stem above the point where the cotyledons are attached and below the growth point. The epicotyl starts to grow after the hypocotyl. Citrus seeds have a rare characteristic that has implication for how these plants are propagated commercially. In the case of plants that reproduce sexually in the ovule inside the flower, the male cells produced by the pollen fertilizes the female reproductive cells, called ova, and an embryo is formed. The ovule is a small structure inside the ovary of a seed plant that contains the female reproductive cells inside the embryo sac. The ovule develops into a seed after fertilization. In the ovule, the embryo sac is contained within the nucellus, which is surrounded by a membrane. The nucellus surrounds the embryo sac in the ovule and acts as a nutritional source that sustains the initial development of the embryo. When an embryo is made naturally in the plant by way of sexual fertilization, the fertilized ovum is called a zygote. A zygote is an embryo formed when a male cell fertilizes a female cell. Because sexual propagation involves the fusion of one male cell and one female cell, the zygotic embryo has characteristics of both parents and is a completely unique individual. In commercial plant propagation, it is very important that the nursery is able to produce plants that are true to type, meaning plants that are exactly the same as the mother plant. Because zygotic embryos have characteristics of both parents, and we can therefore not guarantee that the seedlings will be the same as the mother plant, seed propagation is not generally used in the commercial propagation of tree crops. However, true-to-type citrus rootstock is propagated with seed in commercial citrus nurseries. This is possible because citrus has an unusual characteristic. In citrus seeds, some of the nucellar cells develop into nucellar embryos. A nucellar embryo forms from the nucellus around the embryo sac. Because these embryos are formed from the nucellus, they contain only the genetic material of the mother plant, which makes them true to type. When a citrus seed germinates, more than one seedling grows from each seed. The zygotic embryo will always form one seedling, while the number of nucellar embryos that grow into seedlings varies. The zygotic seedlings are different from nucellar seedlings and are discarded in the nursery. Only true-to-type nucellar seedlings are eventually used as rootstock plants. Roots are typically at the bottom end of the plant. Roots have root caps and do not have nodes, and never bear leaves or flowers directly. Their main functions are to anchor the plant in the soil, absorb and transport nutrients and moisture, and store food. Plants generally have either a taproot system or an adventitious root system. Adventitious means developing in an unusual position. In terms of root development, it means roots that grow directly from the stem or leaf. Monocotyledonous plants, such as grasses, commonly have adventitious root systems, as do all plants propagated through asexual methods. Asexual plant propagation is when plant cells or parts form new plants, such as when cuttings or tissue culture is used in commercial plant propagation. Dicotyledonous plants have taproot systems because the radicle in the seed develops into a taproot when the seed germinates. In terms of its external features, a root is divided into a number of regions, which mostly have to do with how the root grows. Firstly, the root cap covers the very tip of the root and is shaped like a thimble. It protects the delicate growing tip from injury as it pushes its way through the soil. The growing tip that is covered by the root cap is called the region of cell division, or the root meristem. This is the primary growth region of the root, where cells are dividing all the time, forming new cells that later differentiate into specialized root tissue. The meristem is the primary growth region and the tissue where undifferentiated plant cells or meristematic cells are found. Other plant parts, such as stems, also have meristems in their primary growth region. Behind the meristematic region is the region of cell elongation, where the new cells rapidly grow in size, causing the root to lengthen and penetrate deeper into the soil. Overlapping the region of cell elongation and extending further up the root is the root hair region, which is also where cells are differentiated into particular functions. In this region, the outer cell walls of the epidermis cells grow out to form root hairs, which makes the surface through which water and nutrients can be absorbed much larger. The epidermis is the outer layer of tissue of all plant parts. Epidermis literally means over skin, epi meaning over or around, and dermis meaning skin. Almost all the water the plant takes up from the soil enters through the root hair region, where water is absorbed directly through the epidermis and root hairs. In the root hair region, an internal vascular system develops, which contains the two types of vascular tissue. Vascular tissue is the plant tissue that conducts water, nutrients, and sap in plants. The two types of vascular tissue are xylem and phloem. Xylem is a plant tissue that transports water and nutrients from the roots to the leaves, where it is metabolized into food for the plant, mostly in the form of carbohydrates. Phloem contains sieve cells that transport the food that has been metabolized by the leaves to the rest of the plant. Behind the root hair region is the mature region of the root, where it becomes thicker and from where more roots can grow out. In some plants, this region develops a cork layer, referred to as the bark of the root. The vascular system, the xylem and phloem, that starts in the root hair region links up with a system in the older part of the root running through the stele. The stele is the central part of the root, also called the vascular cylinder. The stele connects to the vascular system that runs through the rest of the plant. The nutrients and water that the roots absorb are transported through the xylem in the vascular system of the roots and stem to the leaves. The leaves produce food in the form of carbohydrates through metabolic processes, which are then in turn transported back through the phloem in the vascular system to feed other plant parts, including the roots. The roots can use these carbohydrates to grow, but they can also store some of it for a later use. The citrus tree has a taproot system, with a large taproot and a number of lateral roots or side roots. The root system is relatively shallow, growing only to a depth of between 30 and 60 centimeters. The lateral roots make up most of the root system. Citrus roots don't grow actively all year round. In fact, the roots only grow when shoots are not actively growing. There are usually 3 or more growth flushes every year. Root growth also depends on soil temperature. They stop growing as soon as the temperature in the soil drops below 10 degrees Celsius. The main stem or trunk of a tree plant grows from the plumule of a seed. Lateral branches and stems grow from buds to bear leaves and form more axillary buds or adventitious buds. An axillary bud develops in the axil of a leaf on a stem. Axillary buds sprout new stems. On some of the new stems, flowers and eventually fruit develop. Adventitious buds are subnormal buds found at points along a stem. Stems have swellings at certain points called nodes, which is a point on a stem where a leaf is or was attached. The area between nodes is termed the internode. The major internal parts of a stem are the vascular system, which also consists of xylem and phloem and connects to the vascular system in the roots, and the cambium. Cambium is a tissue layer that contains undifferentiated cells for plant growth. Stems usually grow above the ground and are positively phototropic. Phototropic means turning or growing of a plant towards the light. Some stems are thigmotropic in response to touch, such as the stems of climbing plants. Thigmotropic means turning or growing towards a touch stimulus. In most stems, the meristem, which you may remember means the primary growth region, is apical. This results in apical dominance. Apical means at the apex, in this case the top or end. Apical dominance means growing faster at the apex or tip, which results in lengthening. This is called primary growth. 3 stems continue to grow until the apical meristem falls below the horizontal, at which point it stops growing longer and growth energy is directed into younger stems. This is why tree branches stop growing longer when they become lateral. Cutting off the apical meristem of a stem or branch also stops the branch from growing longer. It directs growth energy into buds along the stem or branch, causing them to start growing. This can be seen clearly in the nursery when young trees are topped. Removing the apical meristem of the main stem of the tree causes it to stop growing taller and to develop side branches, which is how the tree canopy starts developing. Bending is another method that can be used to break apical dominance. This means simply bending a stem or branch so that its tip is below the horizontal and securing it. Stems thicken through secondary growth. The cambia in the stem is made up of undifferentiated cells, and as the stem gets older, these cells differentiate into xylem, phloem, cork, and other woody tissue. This causes the stem to thicken. Stems and trunks form the framework of the plant. The stems support buds and leaves and serves as conduits for water and nutrients. One of their most important functions is to expose leaves to the maximum available sunlight. Citrus trees have main trunks from which lateral branches grow. A number of smaller branches grow from the lateral branches, on which the leaves grow. The citrus tree is referred to as a complex branch tree. In citrus, as in the case in other fruit trees, water shoots also develop. Water shoots, also called water sprouts, are stems that grow from dormant buds buried in old branches, often on the inside of the tree canopy. The shoots grow quickly and vigorously towards the light, feeding on the plentiful nutrients and water in the old wood. This fast growth causes the shoot to be thin and weak. The joint to the branch is also often weak. Water shoots are not ideally suited for bearing fruit, and they are usually removed during pruning. These growth habits have implications for production practices, and in particular for pruning. Removing deadwood and water shoots, improving light interception inside the tree canopy, and getting a good balance between vegetative growth and fruit production are the main aims of pruning. The leaves of plants, also called foliage, are probably their most noticeable structures. Leaf buds develop at the apex of stems and form nodes on the stem once the stem has grown longer. Leaves grow from leaf buds. Leaves can take different forms, depending on the function that they have to perform. There are different types of leaves, classified according to their composition, venation, and position on the stalk. Simple leaves just have a simple blade, but compound leaves have indentations on the edge that can sometimes reach to the center midrib, which divides the leaf into leaflets. Leaf composition is about how leaflets are arranged around the midrib in compound leaves. The most common compositions are pinnate, twice pinnate, palmate, trifoliate, and ternate leaves. Leaf venation refers to the manner in which the veins are arranged on the leaf blade. The most common venation is parallel and pinnate. Leaf position refers to where on the stem the leaves grow and their arrangement on the stem. The most common leaf positions are opposite, alternate, whorled, and basal. A typical simple pinnate foliage leaf consists of a large flat lamina, a petiole, and a leaf base with which the leaf is attached to the stem. The lamina is the blade of the leaf. The petiole is the leaf stalk. The leaves of monocot plants do not have petioles and are attached to the stem by means of a leaf sheath. The midrib and veins on the leaf blade are the vascular cylinders of the leaf. It runs from the stem through the petiole to the midrib and into the veins. On the surface of the leaf there are stomata. Stomata is the plural of stoma, which is a tiny pore surrounded by two guard cells in the epidermis of a plant leaf or stem that controls the passing of water vapor and other gases into and out of the plant. Leaves perform three very important functions, namely photosynthesis, transpiration, and respiration. We will discuss this in more detail in the next section when we look at plant functions. Citrus trees are evergreen. Leaves live only for about 3 years, depending on conditions. During early leaf growth, the young leaves use more carbohydrates than what they produce, becoming contributors only once fully grown at 4 to 6 weeks old. They reach maximum production capacity after about 6 months. Plants have flowers of many different shapes and sizes, with many variations in color, and in the number and arrangement of flower parts. On fruit-producing plants, such as citrus, flowers are also referred to as blossoms. Flowers consist of whorls of flower parts that fit into one another, From the bottom, or outside, the flower consists of the pedicel, receptacle, perianth, stamen, and pistil. The pedicel is the stalk of the flower. The receptacle is a set of very closely spaced nodes to which the whorls are attached. The perianth is the outer structure of a flower, also sometimes referred to as the flower envelope, consisting of the sepals and petals. The stamens form the third wall inside the corolla and are the male reproductive organs of a flower. Some flowers, such as citrus, have more than one wall of stamens. The stamen typically consists of a filament and an anther. The filament is a slender, flexible stalk that supports the anther. The anther bears the pollen in pollen sacs. Pollen grains contain the male reproductive cells. The pistil is the fourth and innermost wall of the flower and the female reproductive organ of the flower. The pistil is made up of the stigma, style, and ovary. The stigma is the top part of the pistil that receives the male pollen grains. The style is an extension of the ovary, shaped like a stalk. It supports the stigma and connects it to the ovary. The ovary contains one or more chambers, which contain ovules. The ovary will become a fruit after the ovules are fertilized, and the ovules will become the seeds. Flowers are the reproductive parts of plants and produce male sex cells contained in pollen grains and female sex cells contained in ovules. Some flowers are brightly colored and produce nectar to attract pollinators, such as birds, butterflies, bees, and mosquitoes. The citrus flower is reasonably typical. It is composed of sepals at the base, which remains on the fruit as the calyx. This is followed by white petals, which enclose the stamens and pistils. This is known as a complete flower, meaning that both female and male reproductive structures are present. Fruit develops from the ovaries contained in flowers and normally contains seeds with zygotic embryos. The fruit protects seeds and in some cases helps them to disperse. Fruit normally consists of a pericarp and one or more seeds. The pericarp is the part that surrounds the seed or seeds and includes the skin and flesh of fleshy fruit. The pericarp in fleshy fruit consists of the exocarp, mesocarp, and endocarp. The exocarp is the outer fruit covering. The mesocarp is the middle fruit covering. The endocarp is the inner covering, in many cases the stiff or hard covering of the seed. The exocarp, mesocarp, and endocarp take on different roles in different types of fruit. In fleshy fruit, the pericarp develops into these three layers around the seeds as the fruit ripens. In a mango and peach, for instance, the exocarp is what we know as the skin, and the mesocarp is the flesh. In stone fruit, such as peaches, plums, and apricots, the endocarp is known as the stone. The seed is normally enclosed in the endocarp. In dry fruit, such as nuts, grains, and legumes, you cannot distinguish between these three layers. Citrus fits into the category fleshy single fruit because the pericarp is fleshy and juicy when mature, and a subcategory called a berry because the pericarp is fleshy throughout. In citrus, the exocarp, also called the flavado, is a few cells thick and has a waxy cuticle on the outer side. It contains pigments which give it the green or orange color and oil glands. The flavado is the colored outer peel layer of citrus fruits, also called the zest. The mesocarp contains loosely packed cells with many air spaces, which later become the albedo. The albedo is the whitish inner portion of the rind of citrus fruit, also called the pith. The endocarp contains the segments and juice vesicles and become the edible part of the fruit. The seeds, if present, are found within the endocarp. The vesicles in citrus fruit contain the juice of the fruit and is also called the pulp. Plants perform many complex functions, but at the basis of it are the three metabolic processes that are fundamental to plant growth, namely photosynthesis, transpiration, and respiration. The principal function of leaves is to absorb sunlight to manufacture carbohydrates through photosynthesis. Think of leaves as the food factory of the plant. Photosynthesis literally means production through light, and it is the metabolic process by which green plants turn carbon dioxide and water into food in the form of carbohydrates using energy from sunlight. This formula shows the process that takes place during photosynthesis. The plant absorbs water through the roots, and it is taken to the leaves through the xylem in the vascular tissue. Through the stomata in the leaves, the plant absorbs carbon dioxide, for which the chemical formula is CO2. The green pigments, or chlorophyll, in the leaves absorb sunlight, and with this energy, the plant manufactures carbohydrates in the form of sugar, with a chemical formula C6H12O6. The remaining oxygen and water molecules are released through the stomata. Chlorophyll is a green pigment, present in all green plants, which is responsible for the absorption of light to provide energy for photosynthesis. The carbohydrates that are manufactured by the leaves are transported back through the phloem to the other plant parts where it is stored until it is needed for plant growth and to produce fruit and flowers. The loss of water vapor through the stomata is known as transpiration. Transpiration means to lose water through the surface of a plant, particularly through the stomata. As we can see from the photosynthesis formula above, about half the water that is absorbed by the roots are lost through the leaves during transpiration. Transpiration helps to cool the plant, which is why the transpiration rate is higher during hot summer months and why plant growth speeds up. It is also why irrigation must increase during the summer. The loss of water through the stomata causes water to move from the roots to other plant parts. Xylem cells are empty, almost like an open pipeline, and water must be pulled through them. When water is lost through transpiration, osmosis causes water to move from the soil into the roots, from where it is pulled through the roots and stem to the leaves. Osmosis is a process by which a substance, usually a gas or fluid, moves from an area where there is a lot of it to an area where there is less of it, in order to equalize the concentrations in the areas. Carbohydrates made by the plant during photosynthesis are not used directly. The process by which a plant converts carbohydrates to growth energy is called respiration. Respiration is an oxidation process through which energy is produced in cells. Only cells with chlorophyll can carry out photosynthesis, but all live cells carry out respiration. During respiration, oxygen is taken in through stomata, and the oxygen is used to break the stored food down into energy. Water and carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere through the stomata, and the energy is used for plant growth. That is the whole picture of the more common plants. There are, of course, plants that are exceptional in that they do not have some of these parts, or plant parts in strange positions, or parts with modified functions. However, if you understand and remember everything that we learned in this module, it will put you in a position to understand how most plants are put together and how they grow, and it will definitely help you to grow citrus plants more productively.